Whenever I talk with schools about coming in or anything, one of the questions I always ask is, what do you see your kids going through? And every single time, 100% of the time, every time, it's our kids are struggling with anxiety right now. Our kids are struggling with depression. Those are the two biggest things right now. And obviously, all dependent, excuse me, it's all dependent on different areas, different states where you are, there may be other things, but every single school, every single time, it's anxiety, it's depression that they're really going through. And it can be from a multitude of things. It can be that, this person's social media, they live this great life. I want that life. I don't live that life. But in reality, we talked a little bit ago about, well, I think I'm struggling, but that person's not struggling, but they are. And it's a big circle. I feel like it could be the same thing in social media. This person lives such a great life. That's what it may look like on social media, but is that the life they really live? Are they really struggling in here, right? So I think that's a big thing right there, is social media can really have to do with anxiety, can really have to do with depression, thinking, I want to live that life. I don't live that life. All these vacations, these pictures, these videos they're putting up.
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Welcome to another episode of the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. Today we're joined by Eric Daddario. Eric, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, Eric, we're happy to have you on, and we want to start off by getting to know you, which is like customary of how we open up every show. So we'll ask the loaded question: who is Eric Daddario?
Well, it's a great question. I can go down a lot of different avenues with that, but I'll say, Eric Daddario, he's a husband, he's a son, he's somebody right now who just has a driving passion, a driving goal of helping youth. So we're talking high schoolers, middle schoolers, college student and student athletes, to really make healthy decisions in their lives so that they can live much happier, healthier, more fulfilling lives. And if they're athletes in that sense, not only live much happier and healthier and more fulfilling lives, but to be able to perform to the best of their ability in their sport. So that's just, if you were to say, who are you right now? I'm just someone who's really a family man with my mother, my father, my brothers, and my wife, but also too, just someone who has a driving passion that just burns inside to help youth to really just make good choices so they can go down a healthy road in their life and achieve things that they want to achieve and not be held back by the decisions that they're making.
Awesome. Well, Eric, the question that comes to mind when listening to that is, was there a singular event or was it certain things throughout your life that caused you to want to have that specific focus?
And that's a great question. It's funny because it all came about, I would say, 7 years ago when a moment happened in my life that me and my family will never forget. And that moment was, we're sitting in my brother's hospital room and the doctor comes in. He looks at both of us and says, looks at my parents first and goes, "You're going to have to say goodbye to your son." And then he looks at me and he goes, "You're going to have to say goodbye to your brother." And those are just words that I can never get out of my head. I will remember them for as long as I live. What he was talking about was my younger brother had overdosed and he was in a coma. And he'd been in a coma for a few days. And he basically said to us, there's nothing else we can do. We've tried everything. You're going to have to say goodbye to him this afternoon. And so I never forget walking in that room, shutting the curtains, looking at him just on life support. And just saying to him, just thinking to myself, like, I can't believe this is happening right now. And so that really motivated me after that to really, I'll back up for a sec, actually. After that, I really thought to myself, how could he have avoided being in this situation? How could he have avoided this happening? And I kept coming up with, if he just made better choices, if he had maybe hung around with a different group of people, if he had not been that kid who was just so easily peer pressured, if he hadn't made some of the choices he did to use some of the substances that he had used, or if he didn't make the decision to think the way he did, I just kept thinking about decisions. And so I said to myself, kids need to learn to make better decisions. Because then after I thought about it affecting his life, I really thought to myself, well, if kids can make better choices, then these things that we see on the TV with teens going down the road that they go down, whether it's with substances, whether it's with suicide, or whether it's just with anxiety taking their life over, then we can help to counter that, and we can help them not go down that road and really start healing with what they're going through. Because it wasn't just my brother, all of our friends too. It's funny, all of our friends went down this road. The only person that didn't go down that road of addiction, of suffering, was me. So I just really thought to myself, I need to help youth make better decisions, because I know it will make an impact.
Mm-hmm. And, as you're talking and saying that, I'm thinking, I get family dynamics. I get kids. We have 4 kids, everybody's so different, right?
Mm.
And so I wonder if you could maybe take us back to your teen years and with your brother, and like, what did his lifestyle look like? And what did your lifestyle look like? And I guess, how did your parents deal with the differences?
Yeah, Tom, that's a great question. And it's funny because our lifestyles were completely different. And I firmly believe that's one of the reasons why he is where he is and I am where I am. So for me, he always wanted to be accepted, right? So if that meant he did something daring because everyone was going to look at him, or if he could do something to get that girl, like just to have eyes on him, he liked the attention. And so that was big for him. That was really big for him. He would go above and beyond to get that attention. And I firmly believe, not the only, but one of the reasons why he was using substances. At a party, if someone was like, drink a beer, you want this? Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're drinking. I'm sure. Why not? You want to smoke? Yeah, try this weed. Yeah, sure. All right, try this. So it was like he wanted to fit in with everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he liked the attention, and he wanted to go where the crowd was going. And so, but he was a great student. He wasn't always like that, but growing up, it just got to the point to where in high school, you could say, he just wanted to be accepted, and he wanted to be in with that in crowd. And so it was like he would do whatever he could for that to happen. Now, for me, and it's not that I didn't want to be in with the in crowd, but for me, I really latched on to hockey. I was a huge hockey player. Like, I had these dreams, these aspirations of playing professional hockey in my life. And so at an early age, I said to myself, I'm going to do whatever I can in order to make that happen. So I'd be down my cellar shooting thousands of pucks a day before practice, go to practice, come home, maybe shoot a little more. And I was just zoned in. I was focused on this happening. And I said to myself, I'm not going to let things like drinking, I'm not going to let things like using drugs affect me. I'm not going to let that happen. I have this dream, I have this goal, I have this aspiration in my life, and I just had this tunnel vision. And that kept me away from making those unhealthy decisions in the beginning. And it's funny because we hung out with the same group of kids. As a matter of fact, I brought him into the group of friends that we hung out with. And so I was able to hang out with them. I was so focused that I was able to hang out with this group of kids and not make the same choices they were. It actually it got to the point to where they were like, all right, we see you doing big things. We see you possibly, and they wouldn't ask me to make certain choices because they knew I didn't want to, but I was still able to hang out with them. So that was the big thing for me growing up, is I just had this tunnel vision. I just had this goal, this aspiration of really making something in hockey. That was the big difference. And it's funny too, because Brendan played sports, but a comment from somebody made him, he had a passion, a love for soccer. And somebody made a comment to him once, and it really kind of hurt his passion for soccer. And he actually stopped playing. And I believe that if he had continued on with that, he could have made something of it, and he could have went in a different direction. So that's the big difference, you could say. Was me. I was focused. I had a goal, and I said to myself, I need to make this happen. But for him, he didn't really have a goal, right? He didn't really have vision of what he wanted. He was just like, you could say, like wandering aimlessly. And so because of that, I just feel like he didn't make choices like, all right, if I make this choice, it's going to affect this goal in this way. But that's how I thought. And so he didn't have that. And that was the big difference right there. I had that goal to really say, all right, if I make this choice, how's it going to affect this goal, this dream, this aspiration that I have in my life?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess when we have these conversations, it's really really easy, I should say, to kind of lose sight of the individual. So would you be okay with telling us a little bit about Brendan and kind of the type of brother that he was before all of this went down?
You mean like before he started getting addicted?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's a great point. I don't think I've ever been asked that in a podcast, actually. And I think that's a great point to paint that picture, because before I get into that, when I talk with students, I always put up a picture of Brendan, and he's smiling and he's happy, and he's it's just like I say to them, I say, he looks happy, right? And everyone shakes their head like he looks like he's enjoying his life, right? And everyone's like, yeah. And then I say to them, and he doesn't look that much different than some of you in the crowd. And then I put a picture of up when he's addicted, and he looks completely different. And it's like, and you wouldn't think this is him, right? So I think that's a great question, because a lot of people just think, oh, they grow up and they make these choices their whole life, but that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up, Brendan, he loved basketball. He loved soccer. He was such a creative person. He loved to draw. He loved to just go outside and play. And he had such a contagious smile from ear to ear. He loved to play the guitar. So he had a lot of joy, a lot of love in his life for sports, to play soccer, as I said, to play basketball. He had an enjoyment to playing the guitar, for drawing. He was just like such a joyful person. Never thought growing up that he would go through this. Like, just last person I would think would go through this, because he's just like, he was happy and he enjoyed his life. And our parents, this is another misconception too. Our parents are not drug addicts. They're not alcoholics. They just loved us so much. And they did everything they could to see us succeed. That's all they ever wanted us 4 boys, because I'm one of 4 boys, is to just see us succeed, to just see us happy. And they did everything and anything they could to make us happy, to make us succeed in life. And so, yeah, he had so much joy with so much in life. And when this all started happening, I was shocked. I mean, don't get me wrong, he wasn't an angel. I mean, one of 4 boys, there's a lot that goes on, right? So, I mean, yeah, he got in a little trouble here and there, but nothing that pointed to, when he was younger, like, oh my God, this kid's going down a horrible road. No.
Right. And it's interesting that you said about when he stopped the sports, that's when you really saw the change. And, we recently had a conversation with somebody on the show, and we were talking just about the benefits of playing sports, right? For kids, for teenagers. And it does, like, there's so many teenagers that don't know what they want to do when they finish high school, right? And I get that. Like, there's so much world out there and so many things to, learn and figure out. But so if maybe they haven't figured that and they're working towards that goal, at least if they can focus on a sport in their, their off time and have those goals. And it doesn't need to be anything grandiose, but just knowing that they're being held accountable, that maybe there's 3 practices a week they have to make sure they get to and do their best, and that their team's also depending on them to have something where people are holding them accountable. I think that's so important. And it's such a good help to avoid some of these scenarios, right?
Yeah. And I think that, I think those are great points, and that's awesome. Just to add on to that too, sports teach you so much about life, right? You're part of a team. Well, not all, but most sports, I would say
Yep.
probably 95, 97% of sports, you're a part of a team. And when you're part of a team, you have to learn to work with each other, which is a
Right.
very great tool, right, to have in life. And as you said, you have to be accountable. You have practices you have to get to. You have to get there for a certain amount of time. You've got to put in effort. You've got to work. So these are all things in life that are so important that help you later in life, whatever it is, whether you want to have a podcast, whether you work, whether you work in finance, whatever you do, all these things in life help you in sports. And I also too think that it keeps you from getting bored, because a lot of things I hear with kids is I'm bored, and so I make these choices. And then it's funny because then I'll say to them, so drinking, so smoking got you on board? And they're just look at me like, I never thought of it. I said, yeah, I mean, it was just something to do, right? It's not that you were any bored. It's not that you were any more active. It's just that now you're actually doing something. So just getting up and even doing something can replace that feeling of boredom.
Yeah.
Now, the big thing too that comes with sports is, again, when you're playing sports, when you're training, when you see yourself improving, it really helps build your confidence. So I'm curious, do you think some of the challenges that Brendan had were could you think some of them could tie back to maybe a lack of confidence or just not enough confidence in himself?
Yeah, I do. It's funny that you talk about that. There was one incident that I really, really, really think affected him when he was younger. He had this bald spot in his head up here. And as I said, he just wanted, at the beginning, he wanted to be in with the crowd. He wanted to be liked. He wanted to be around those people. And when he had that, really thinking to himself, like, oh my God, how is this going to affect me? And so he would legitimately wear hats in school. And the teacher would ask him, take the hat off. And he'd be like, no. And the teacher would like, take the hat off. And he wouldn't take it off because he was so embarrassed about it, right? And so then it got to the point where he got surgery on and it looked much better, but he still knew it was there a little. And so it continuously affected him. And I think that maybe if he had a team that he was a part of, that maybe, they would have been able to talk him up and help him through this and support him. But he just had his own voice up here telling him all these things. And it just really affected him. And that's when he really started suffering from social anxiety. And that's a big part of how everything started happening with him. Try to hide those emotions and feelings, to try to numb and dull them, to mask the pain and the struggle he was going through with that bald spot and that feeling of everything.
And I know you talk to teenagers about the fact that, some of them feel that they almost deserve some of these feelings and thoughts that are going on in their head sometimes, right? Like you said, like the anxiety, the depression, etc. So when you're talking to teenagers, how do you let them know that this is nothing that they deserve to be obviously going through? And, what words do you say to them?
Yeah, it's funny. I just spoke at a school in Ohio, and this blew my mind when a kid came up to me after, and he goes, look, I've never talked to anybody about this, but I just feel like I need to let this off my chest. And okay, what's going on? And he said, I've attempted suicide 15 times and it hasn't worked. And I actually had a gun in my mouth last week, about to end it all. And so we talked through it a little. I said, why haven't you told anybody about this? And he looked at me dead serious. And when he said this, I legitimately shed a tear, almost started bawling my eyes out that he would think this. And he said, because I'm a bad person. And I said, and so it's just these kids, they put this meaning of who they are because they're going through things. And so they label themselves this way because of struggles that they may be going through. And so when I talk to them about this, I let them know that, look, everybody goes through tough moments in their life because that's just a part of life. A word I use is you can't run from struggles. You can't hide from them. You can't avoid them. Everybody in life is going to face them. And it's how we face that adversity that is going to help us later in life. And so I really get them to understand that they're not the only ones going through it. Because a lot of times youth will feel like, well, I am struggling, but the person over there isn't struggling. But it's funny because the person over there they don't think is struggling is thinking the same thing. Well, I'm struggling, but that person's not struggling. So it's almost like a big circle. And not to say everybody's struggling, but nobody wants to talk about it, right? And so that's a big thing is getting them to realize that we all struggle in life. And it's not just going to be one thing. It's going to be multiple things. And for some people, it's more. It's much bigger. And for some people, it isn't. But some people go through it more. So just getting them to realize that the struggle is part of life. But when we go through those tough moments, to not put a label on ourselves that, like that kid did, I'm a bad person. Right? Just getting them to realize that struggle, because I'm upfront with students when I talk to my athletes. I don't sugarcoat anything. It's like, you're going to struggle in life because that's a part of your life. But the meaning, what we say to ourselves up here when we struggle and how we label ourselves is so important because that's going to determine a lot about how we react and the actions that we take. So just getting them to see that, they're worth the fight through the struggle to get on the other side, that they matter, that they have value, and that most importantly, they can do it. They can get through it because a lot of them just don't think that they can.
Mm-hmm. And for parents who are listening, what would you say to them in regards to what would it look like sometimes for youth if they're struggling?
Yeah. So I would say for me, I call it the tuition test. Basically, you have this gut feeling, this intuition that something's going on. Sit them down and talk to them. Because I know so many times where it was just like something's going on with him. And then I didn't say or do anything, and there was. So they in here, if you think something's going on, speak up, sit them down, say something. But also, to answer your question more deeper, do they really love to do something? So perfect example, Brendan loved to draw. When he started going through this, he stopped drawing. He loved to play the guitar. He stopped playing the guitar. He wasn't as active in his room a lot, sleeping a lot. Just, you could say, like, at some point, mood swings. So it's almost like, who is this person, right? Because a lot of the things that they really enjoy, that they like doing, they don't do anymore. They just drop them. It's like, oh, you love to do that, though. Why'd you stop that? And it's just because this was all he was thinking about now, right? Like, because of these choices and what was happening up here to his brain and what those decisions to use those substances were doing. He just fell out of love with everything but using those substances. So I would say to just really look out, and not really having an appetite anymore, not really eating, being irritable. There's a lot of things out there, but I say that when you feel it in here a lot of the time, they know. But I just want to add something to that really quick about adults, because I talk to adults too, and this is what I talk to them about, is that they're a huge part of the solution. Because see, here's the thing. So many kids have so much fear, so much nerve, so much concern to approach somebody when they're struggling. And, the home should be a safe place for them. The home should be a place where if they're struggling, they can walk right up to their mother or father, whoever they live with, and say to them, I need help. But nowadays, right now, kids struggle with that so much. So many, I forget the stat, but I think it was like 80% of kids just don't feel like they have an adult in their life they can trust with this, right? And I'm not going to dive too much into it, but the adults just really feel like when I talk to them, they're like, well, I'm the parent, and so they should listen to me, and I get no respect. But I say to them, okay, I understand, I get that, but are you giving them respect back? Do you yell at them when they get in trouble? Is that how you handle it? Do you yell at them? Do you just ground them? Or do you really sit them down and do you really listen? Really listen. Don't try to talk over them, but you really listen to them and really listen to what they're saying and why they maybe got in trouble, what happened, why they made these decisions. And I just think that if we can create a safe space at our homes for our kids to really open up to us, then we can make a dent in this whole thing. We can really help youth to start dealing with what they're going through in here instead of making the unhealthy choices like my brother did. So I think that that's a big part of it. And not to say it's easy, right, for parents, but I mean, I just think that in trying to parent in that way, to really just, really get to know our kids. Like, I know you say you know your kids, but do you really know? I always say to parents, you really know what your kids go through on an everyday basis, all the stress, all the struggle they may face. Do you really know them? Or do you just assume it because you say, I was in high school, I was in college one time, but it's not the same.
And one thing that I always think of when I was working as a social worker, there was a teenager I was talking to, and they said, I don't talk to my parents because they always look busy. They're always like they never look like they have time, and I don't want to bother them, right? And that's been something that I always have kept in the back of my mind, that if they already feel awkward for what they want to say, and they see that we're busy, they're not going to go out of their way to share, right? So as parents, I strongly believe that we have to make that time to check in with our kids and not always look like we're so busy, right? Give them a chance to come and sit down with us and talk. And, one of those moments where, even if it's right before bed, because for some reason that's when it usually happens, the conversations come around, that we don't say, okay, we got to get back on schedule, right? And just let them talk and share with us.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. 100%.
Cool. Now, one thing I'm kind of curious to ask, and if you're, if you're not comfortable with answering
Listen,
this,
I'm an open book. That's how we help people. So just shoot.
Okay. One thing that you mentioned, a while ago in this interview was that Brendan came into that friend group kind of because of you. It was your friend group, or at least you guys were a part of the same friend group.
Yeah.
Do you have any feelings of guilt, or did you have any feelings of guilt at any time?
100% I did. 100%. 100% I did. Said to myself, it's my fault. I brought him into this friend group. He started making these choices. He went down this road. If I never brought him in this friend group, this never would have happened. And so I was depressed for a little bit about that, because I blamed myself for his death. But then I really sat back and said to myself, I didn't make him make these choices. When I really zoomed out and looked at everything, yes, I brought him in. Yes, maybe would he have not gone down this road if he was hanging out with different kids? 100%. That possibly could have happened. Maybe he'd still be here, but I didn't make him make those choices, right? I didn't force him to. I didn't say either you do this or we're not going to be brothers anymore. He made those choices on his own, and his choices created his destiny. But in the beginning, yes, I thought to myself, man, like, I brought him into this group. It's a large part of why he went down this road, and I blamed myself. But I was able to actually get over that, and just see that it was the choices he made that what ultimately led to what happened to him was the choices he made. So it wasn't my fault.
Of course, now being able to take what you already know and kind of apply that hindsight, because again, if somebody's listening to this, there's probably a reason why they were motivated to listen to this episode of the podcast. What would you say to somebody who maybe suspects that a loved one is in Christ like that? Like, I guess if you could think, what would you have done differently that somebody else could have the opportunity to implement today?
Sure. And again, when I talk with students and athletes, I don't just talk to them directly, but I talk to if they know a teammate or a friend, because I think that's a huge part of it too. Not really just talking to that person struggling, but there are a lot of great stories out there. We're a brother, we're a friend, we're a teammate who spoke up. And this is I can't stress it enough. This is a tough conversation to have, because there's so much fear, there's so much nerves, concern thoughts going through your head of thinking, all right, I know this person's going down a bad road, and I know what can happen. But if I say something, they may be pissed at me. They may want to fight me. They never want to talk to me again. And so because of those emotions and feelings, we just look the other way. And that's exactly with me. I just like look the other way, like I didn't see anything when I knew everything that was going on. But I would say to have that tough conversation, to approach a trusted adult, to approach their mother, their father, if you have that relationship with them and you can, and you just let them know that look, I'm really concerned about your son, your daughter. These are the choices they're making, and I really care about them, and I don't want to see anything bad happen to them or for it to lead to anything. And just being upfront and vulnerable and honest with that person. And again, I can't stress this enough. This is not an easy conversation. Mm-hmm. It's not. But I always say when I'm talking to the students and athletes, if I knew what I know now, and you brought me back 15, 20 years ago, in a heartbeat, I'd say something to my parents. I wouldn't care. I wouldn't care if he came into my room yelling, screaming, I wouldn't care. Because what I would truly cared about was his health, was his future, what possibly would have happened to him. Because, again, when I talk to students, I say, look, I knew the choices he was making, and I knew the road he was going down, because where we grew up, a lot of the kids were making the choices that he eventually made. And we went to funerals. We knew kids that died from this stuff. And I knew he was going down that road, but it's crazy. I knew he was going down and what could happen, but I still turned the other cheek because I was just like, I don't want him to be mad. I don't want people to call me the big buzzword snitch. Mm-hmm. But I always say that when we talk about this isn't like snitching that someone stole something from me at school. Mm-hmm. Like, we're talking about people's lives. We're talking about, families. They have brothers, they have sisters, they have parents that if something was to happen to them, it can really affect someone's life for the rest of their life if this happens to a loved one. And so just getting them to see that it's a tough conversation to have, but I've had people reach out to me after and said, I was so nervous to have this conversation. Those exact same things you were talking about the fear, about them being mad at me, about them not ever wanting to be my friend. Yeah, in the beginning, they were mad. But they came up to me after and said, man, I can't thank you enough for that. I can't thank you enough for having that conversation, for really getting this conversation started. Because it's funny, when people are struggling, they want help, but they're scared. They're scared of what change is going to be like. They're scared of not having that feeling. They're scared of having to go through the process to start healing. But they really want it to happen, but they don't want to pull the trigger. And so sometimes when somebody else does it for you, that can start it.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, like, especially as teenagers, kids share a lot via text messages, Snapchat, Instagram, and it's sometimes more, they share these deep, dark secrets, thoughts that are going through their minds with their peers. Yeah. And not maybe their parents, right? And really, as a peer, some of them could be in the same boat, and some of them just don't know what to do with this information, right? It's heavy, it's a lot to take in, but like you said, right, like if it is something that, literally life and death, then I think it's important as parents that we're reminding our kids, you don't have to hold on to what your friends are sharing with you. Like if you don't have to say names, but if you need to get that off your chest, you can share that also with us, because it's a lot for other teenagers to have to deal with as well.
Yeah. That's a big thing too, is the kids think that, well, if I speak up for so-and-so, then they're going to know my name. And that may be the case in some situations, but a lot of times in schools, it's like, if you come to me, and you tell me what so-and-so is going through, your name doesn't get mentioned. I just approach them and say, look, someone approached me concerned, right? Or you could even talk to their parents and say, look, I'm coming to you because I'm concerned. Please don't mention my name. Can you just say it was a friend that was concerned? And so it's you can, if you do this in private with that person and that person isn't there who's struggling, then, you know, there's a pretty good chance that they won't know who actually approached that person, because you can hide that, and they could just say something like, well, it was a friend, it was a teammate, it was a classmate who said they were concerned about you. And so, you know, you may think they know, but there's plenty of teammates and classmates and friends that they have. So that's a big thing too.
No, that's a really good point. Now, in terms of, I guess, kind of the struggles that youth are going through today, because I know if we have kids who are like high school age or middle school age, things are a lot different for them than they were for us, right? Yeah. Things just change so quickly. So what are some of the kind of common things that you see that parents today should be aware of that maybe they aren't?
Yeah, I think the two biggest struggles, if this is what you're saying, the two biggest struggles that I see constantly, whenever I talk with schools about coming in or anything, one of the questions I always ask is, what do you see your kids going through? And every single time, 100% of the time, every time, it's our kids are struggling with anxiety right now. Our kids are struggling with depression. Those are the two biggest things right now. And obviously, all dependent, excuse me, it's all dependent on different areas, different states where you are. There may be other things, but every single school, every single time, it's anxiety, it's depression that they're really going through. And it can be from a multitude of things. You know, it can be that, this person's social media, they live this great life. I want that life. I don't live that life. But in reality, we talked a little bit ago about, well, I think I'm struggling, but that person's not struggling, but they are. And it's a big circle. I feel like it could be the same thing in social media. This person lives such a great life. That's what it may look like on social media. But is that the life they really live? Are they really struggling in here, right? So I think that's a big thing right there, is social media can really have to do with anxiety, can really have to do with depression, thinking, I want to live that life. I don't live that life. All these vacations, these pictures, these videos they're putting up. Another thing too, we talked about it, right? I see is sports. Sports. When kids play sports, a lot of the times, and they play it for years and years and years, and they're taking it seriously, it's a huge part of their identity. And so they think to themselves, all right, especially in high school, I'm going to play at the next level. I'm going to play here. I'm going to play at this school. And they get this plan for themselves. And when it doesn't work out, it can crush them. I'm not saying it always does, but there are some kids out there who are really riding on scholarships to go and to play at colleges, to play at the next level. And when it doesn't happen, it crushes them. It crushes them because they had this goal, this dream, and when it doesn't happen, it's like, what do I do now? I've been playing this sport for 15, 17 years. It's all I've known. And I wake up, I go to school, and I go to practice. On the weekends, I play games. But now that's not going to happen because I'm not going to a school to play it, right? Or even to take it a step further, all right, I'm going to play at, let's say, Division II school, but I want that Division I scholarship because all my friends get Division I scholarships. Like Division II, it's not good enough. So there's just so many things that kids struggle with in life. I mean, you both, we could sit here for days and talk about all the things that they go through, right? I mean, we can talk about school too, right? Seniors in high school, getting into that school that they want to go to, or maybe their parents really want them to go to one school, but they want to go to another. So, I mean, also it's grades, right? Grades. Having to get great grades, having to please our parents, or we really want to get good grades to get into a certain college. There's a multitude of things that kids are being stressed with now. And this is the reason why so many kids are struggling. And then, as we all know, the pandemic too, right? Didn't help. It's just magnitude of things. And my personal opinion is there are kids still out there struggling from it. And there's going to be kids out there for a while still struggling from it. It's funny. I just think some people think it's all right. The pandemic's over. Everyone's good now. We're back to normal. And yeah, we're pretty much back to normal. There are some people out there who wear masks, and it is what it is. But there is still somebody out there who is still affected. You could say it's PTSD from COVID, from things they saw, from things they went through on their own. So there's just so many things out there that you are struggling with right now.
Now, the other things too, because you go to all these schools and have these conversations, and I know that there's been some successes as well. Are there any that stick out particularly that you would like to share?
Are you talking about like when someone's going through a tough moment in their life, or?
Yeah, and you're able to see that transition, and they end up making the better decisions.
Yeah, so I can, I mean, I have a ton of them. The one that sticks out to me is actually like one of the first speaking gigs. It's funny, I get there, I'm like, all right, I'm going to go and I'm going to speak, and I want to make an impact, but I don't think I'm about to make this big of an impact. I was like, wow. When I was done speaking, everybody files out of the auditorium. They're just leaving. And there's this girl who's just sitting in her seat. I'm talking to the administrator after, and she's like, oh my God, thank you for coming. And we're having a little conversation. I can see out of the corner of my eye, this girl's, she hasn't left yet. Everyone's basically gone. And I can tell, I'm saying to myself, she's contemplating something. So me and the administrator, we're done talking, I pack my stuff up, and all of a sudden she pops up out of her chair. She walks over to me and says, excuse me, Eric, can we talk for a sec? So I pull her aside and say, well, what's going on? She looks at me and she goes, I couldn't stop thinking about my boyfriend the whole time you were talking. He's making those same choices your brother was making. And I don't want him to go down that road. And then she said to me, his father, he died from an overdose. And I just don't want that to happen to him. I don't know what to do. And then all of a sudden, it's the winter time, so she's wearing a sweatshirt. And she rolls her sleeve up and she shows me her arm. And she's got cuts from her elbow to her wrist. And she says to me, I'm a cutter. I cut myself because I just don't think that I'm pretty enough, that I'm smart enough, that I'm just enough. And then she goes, but I don't want anybody to know what I'm going through, but I'm so scared for my boyfriend. What do I do? And I just looked at her and I said, well, you just took the first step. You just spoke for you and your boyfriend. And so she and I walked down the guidance counselor's office that day. She talks with her counselor. She opened up. She started getting help. Her boyfriend started getting help. And then come to find out, she doesn't cut herself anymore. And her boyfriend isn't making those same decisions, all because she took that first step to just have this conversation. So it warms my heart when people are able to approach me. I'm able to help them talk with a trusted adult, and they get the help that they really, I don't like the word need. I like the word deserve, because I feel like everybody deserves help. Regardless of the choices they've made, what they're going through, they deserve to get help. But yeah, that's one story of many that success stories that I've had. But that one always sticks out because it was the first one. I'm thinking to myself, all right, I'm going to go to the school. I'm going to speak. Hopefully I do a good enough job. I don't fumble or anything. When this happened, I was like, wow, really? Wow. Okay. So,
yeah, I guess it just really emphasizes the importance of just really starting that conversation.
Yeah. I can't stress that enough.
So Eric, how often are you speaking, coming in and speaking to schools or youth in different areas?
I mean, I'm constantly year round, and it all depends. Like I was on the road last week, spoke in Ohio, and then I spoke in West Virginia. I'll be on the road in a week and a half. I'm actually going to a coaches convention to speak to a bunch of coaches about their players. So I'm constantly speaking all the time, to parents, to students, to athletes, to youth groups, just getting out there and trying to spread this message as much as possible.
And I think that's great that schools, coaches, all that are realizing, what, we need to get this information out there to our teenagers. We need our coaches, people who, are responsible for these teenagers for X amount of time a week. It's so good for them to learn as well, right? For them to know what to look for and all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, because as I said, it is the parents, but it's also too the coaches. It's also the people who maybe run the YMCAs, who, run the youth groups. to be able to be that trusted adult, to see the signs, all of those things. It takes everybody. It takes everybody to be in on this, to have that mindset of helping those youth going through those tough moments, being there for them, being that trusted adult. It takes everybody.
And for the coaches too, I think it's important for them to be on lookout and know, like, for athletes, especially playing at a high level, there's a lot of anxiety that can potentially come with that, right? Their performance, if they make mistakes, on the field, on the ice, on the court, and how the coaches are going to react to that. And if they have that barrier, then I feel like they're not able to perform at their top ability, because it's almost something holding them back, right? So for coaches to realize, okay, how do I coach somebody in this position, for them to learn, but also for them to realize, like, they can take a deep breath and know that, like, the rest of the team has them, and they'll be okay in whatever decisions they make while they're playing their sport.
Well, just to touch on that for a sec here, I really feel like, and not just pro athletes, but I really feel like when somebody plays a sport, I think even more so when someone's good at a sport, it's like they're good. Nothing's going to happen to them. How could something happen to them? They're so good at basketball. They're so good at hockey. They're so good at football. How could, man, like, and then you even got people saying, well, how could they struggle? Like, come on, they're living the life. They're a great athlete. They're about to go to a Division I school. But in reality, what I have found, more pressure. More pressure from the parents. It's more pressure on themselves. It's more pressure playing at that high level to perform. And I won't go into the story, but I remember speaking to a Division I hockey team, and one of the premier hockey teams in the country. Every year they're playing for a national championship. They're contending. They're always making an NCAA tournament. And this kid comes up to me after 6'5", just huge, drafted by a team. He's going to play in the NHL someday. It's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when. If he decides to leave, because he's only a sophomore, I think, this year. So we get 2 more years, and he just breaks down. And he's crying for 5 minutes. He can't get a word out. And it's just like, I'm going through so much in life right now, man. And it's just not only affecting me on the ice, but in life. And I don't know what to do. There's just so much going on. I have so much riding on this year. And I was just like, wow, like, yeah, you do. You're right with everything you told me. So, yeah, it's just, I always say, whether I'm talking to athletes, parents, students, we're all human. We're all human, right? We can't get past that. We all have emotions. We all have feelings. And we can struggle in life. You will struggle in life, regardless of how much money you have, where you come from, where you live. And so I think that's really important for everyone to understand, is that it's not like, oh, I'm going through a struggle, I'm a bad person, or something happened. No, everyone goes through it. It's how we see it and how we react and deal with it, the label that we give ourselves, that's going to be able to help us to actually get through it.
Excellent. Well, Eric, I think this has been a fantastic conversation. Again, just some really useful information here, and even just the stuff for coaches, because again, one of the things we talked about earlier, sometimes it's not always easy to talk to your parents, but having that trusted adult, and for a lot of people, that's a coach. So
yeah, for sure, definitely.
Now, I want to just share your website as well. So for those who are watching, you can see it here, but for those who are listening, it's thedecisionswemake.com. Eric, anything else that you wanted to highlight, or if you wanted to share as well, what we can expect from you moving forward?
Yeah, I'm on all social medias too. So I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on TikTok. Just search Eric Daddario and I'll come right up. But yeah, moving forward, right now I'm speaking. I'm slowly working on a book. I'm taking my time and just working on other ways to bring value, other ways that I can get this message out there to youth and even to parents, coaches, so that we can just have this impact on the world and help these youth that are just going through so much in their life. So that's going to be a work in process, a course, a book, but eventually that will come out, to just have other tools for these kids to be able to use when they're going through these tough moments.
Awesome stuff. Well, Eric, again, thank you once again for joining us for this episode of the podcast. Again, we really appreciate it. And for anyone who's been watching or listening, thank you for letting us disrupt your everyday.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.
Thank you.